Jake Morrison stared at the view screen as their ship moved closer to the strange planet below. The blue and green world looked peaceful enough, but something about it made his skin crawl. He had been a soldier for 12 years and learned to trust his gut feelings about danger. "Take us down to the coordinates Dr. Carter marked," Captain Alex Ryan said from his command chair. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations as the ship began its descent through the atmosphere. Jake watched the planet's surface grow larger on the screen. They were heading toward what looked like a massive crystal structure that rose from the ground like a frozen mountain. The thing was huge, maybe 5 miles across and reaching up into the clouds above. Dr. Lisa Carter stood next to him, her eyes bright with excitement. She was the best scientist Jake had ever worked with and probably the smartest person on the ship. She was also beautiful in a way that made it hard for him to focus when she was around. "Look at those formations," Lisa sighed, pointing at the screen. "The crystal structure shows signs of intelligent design. This could be the first proof of advanced alien life we've been looking for." Jake nodded, but kept his doubts to himself. In his experience, things that looked too good to be true usually were. The military had sent his team out here because strange signals had been coming from this planet for months. Signals that stopped as soon as their ship got close. The ship landed on a flat area about a mile from the crystal structure. Jake could see it clearly through the windows now, and it was even more impressive up close. The crystals seemed to shift and move in the light, creating patterns that hurt his eyes to look at directly. "Atmospheric readings show breathable air," reported Lieutenant Tom Bradley from his station. "Gravity is close to Earth normal. Temperature is comfortable for human activity." Captain Ryan stood up from his chair. "All right, people, we're going to take this slow and careful. Dr. Carter, I want you to take a small team to examine the structure. Morrison, you and your security team will provide protection." Jake gathered his gear and checked his weapons. He had brought 4 good soldiers with him on this mission, all veterans who knew how to handle themselves in dangerous situations. They would keep the science team safe no matter what they found down there. The landing party consisted of Jake and his 4 security personnel, Dr. Carter and 3 other scientists, plus 2 engineers to handle any technical problems they might encounter. 12 people total, which Jake thought was a good number for this kind of mission. They left the ship and walked across the rocky ground toward the crystal structure. As they got closer, Jake could see that the crystals were not just sitting on the surface. They went deep into the ground, like roots of some enormous tree made of glass and light. "The structure appears to be alive," Dr. Carter said, scanning it with her instruments. "I'm reading energy patterns that suggest some kind of consciousness or intelligence." Jake felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Living crystals that might be intelligent was not what he wanted to hear. His hand moved closer to his weapon, and he saw his men doing the same thing. They reached the base of the structure and found what looked like an entrance. It was an opening in the crystal wall that seemed to pulse with soft blue light. The opening was just the right size for humans to walk through, which Jake found suspicious. "It's like it knows we're here," said Dr. Helen Cooper, one of the other scientists. "The energy readings are increasing as we get closer." Lisa stepped toward the entrance, but Jake grabbed her arm gently. "Let me go first," he said. "That's what I'm here for." She smiled at him, and for a moment Jake forgot about the danger. Lisa had that effect on him, and he knew it was probably not good for his judgment as a security officer. Jake entered the crystal structure with his weapon ready. The walls around him glowed with that same blue light, and he could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The corridor stretched ahead of him, leading deeper into the structure. Behind him, he heard Lisa gasp. "Jake, you need to see this," she called out. He turned around and saw that the entrance had changed. Instead of the simple opening they had walked through, there was now an elaborate archway covered with symbols and patterns that seemed to move and shift as he watched. "The structure is responding to our presence," Lisa said, her voice full of wonder. "It's actually communicating with us?" Jake was less impressed. In his experience, things that changed when you weren't looking were usually trying to trap you. He kept his weapon ready and his eyes open for any sign of danger. The team moved deeper into the structure, following corridors that seemed to lead them in a specific direction. Jake noticed that the walls were getting more complex as they went, covered with patterns and symbols that made his eyes water when he tried to focus on them. At the center of the structure, they found a large chamber with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. In the middle of the chamber stood something that made Jake's blood run cold. It was roughly human-shaped but made entirely of crystal. The thing was about 7 feet tall and seemed to be constantly shifting and changing, like water that had been frozen in mid-motion. It had no face that Jake could recognize, but somehow he knew it was looking at him. "Incredible," Lisa whispered. She stepped toward the creature without any sign of fear. "Hello," she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "We are humans from the planet Earth. Can you understand us?" The crystal being turned toward her, and Jake saw something that looked almost like a smile form in the shifting patterns of its face. The humming sound grew louder, and Jake felt a strange pressure in his head, like someone was trying to push their way into his thoughts. Lisa reached out her hand toward the creature, and Jake started to move forward to stop her, but then the being reached out its own hand, made of clear crystal that sparkled with inner light. When their hands touched, the entire chamber filled with blinding light, and Jake heard Lisa scream. The light faded and Jake rushed forward to catch Lisa as she fell backward. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, and she was breathing hard like she had just run a long distance. The crystal being stood perfectly still, watching them with what Jake could only describe as curiosity. "Lisa, are you okay?" Jake asked, supporting her weight as she tried to stand up straight. She blinked several times and looked around the chamber like she was seeing it for the first time. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice sounded different somehow, softer and more distant than usual. "It spoke to me, Jake, not with words, but I could understand what it was trying to say." Dr. Cooper ran her scanner over Lisa, checking for any signs of injury or contamination. "Her vital signs are elevated but stable," she reported. "No obvious physical damage." The crystal being made a sound that was almost musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Lisa turned toward it and smiled, which made Jake uncomfortable. Something about her expression reminded him of the way people looked when they were under the influence of drugs. "It calls itself Echo," Lisa said. "It's been alone here for a very long time, waiting for someone to talk to. It wants to learn about us, about how we think and feel." Jake kept his weapon ready and positioned himself between Lisa and the creature. "We should get back to the ship and report this to the captain," he said. "We need to run more tests before we do anything else," but Lisa shook her head. "No, Jake, this is too important. Echo is offering to share knowledge with us. Think about what we could learn from a being that's lived for thousands of years." The creature made that musical sound again, and Jake felt the same pressure in his head that he had experienced before. For just a moment, he had the strangest feeling that something was looking through his eyes, seeing his thoughts and memories. They spent another hour in the chamber, with Lisa asking questions and the creature responding in ways that only she seemed to understand. Jake watched carefully, but he could not see any obvious threat. The being seemed genuinely curious about humans and eager to communicate. When they finally returned to the ship, Jake was relieved to be back in familiar surroundings. The crystal structure had felt wrong somehow, like a place where the normal rules didn't apply. He filed his report with Captain Ryan and recommended extreme caution in future contacts with the alien. That night, Jake had the most vivid dream of his life. He dreamed that he was in his quarters on the ship, lying in his bed, when Lisa came to visit him. She was wearing a thin nightgown that left little to his imagination, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. In the dream, Lisa climbed into bed with him and began to touch him in ways that made his heart race. She whispered things in his ear that he had always wanted to hear her say, and she did things to him that he had only imagined in his most private fantasies. The dream felt so real that when he woke up, Jake was surprised to find himself alone in his quarters. His sheets were soaked with sweat, and his body was responding as if the dream had actually happened. He could still smell Lisa's perfume in the air, which was impossible since she had never been in his room. Jake showered and got dressed, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the dream. He had been attracted to Lisa for months, but he had never allowed himself to act on those feelings. She was a colleague and a friend, and he respected her too much to complicate their working relationship. At breakfast in the ship's dining hall, Jake noticed that several crew members looked tired and distracted. Lieutenant Bradley had dark circles under his eyes, and Engineer Kate Murphy kept staring off into space like she was thinking about something else entirely. Lisa arrived late to breakfast, and Jake was shocked by her appearance. She was wearing her uniform, but something about the way she moved and carried herself was completely different. She walked with a confident, almost seductive grace that he had never seen before. "Good morning, Jake," she said, sitting down next to him. Her voice had the same soft, distant quality it had developed after her contact with Echo. "Did you sleep well?" Jake felt his face get hot as memories of his dream came flooding back. "Fine," he said, not meeting her eyes. "How are you feeling after yesterday?" Lisa smiled in a way that made Jake's pulse quicken. "I feel wonderful," she said. "Echo showed me so many interesting things. I can't wait to go back and learn more." During the morning briefing, Captain Ryan announced that they would be staying on the planet for at least another week to study the crystal structure and its inhabitant. Lisa volunteered to lead the research team, and Jake was assigned to continue providing security. As they prepared for another expedition to the surface, Jake noticed that more crew members were acting strangely. People who were normally professional and focused seemed distracted and emotional. There had been 2 arguments in the engine room and a fight in the recreation area, all over minor disagreements that should have been easy to resolve. Back in the crystal chamber, Lisa spent hours communicating with Echo while Jake and his security team stood guard. The creature seemed more active than before, its crystalline form shifting and changing more rapidly. The humming sound was louder too, and Jake felt that pressure in his head getting stronger. When they returned to the ship that evening, Jake was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical activity. It was like something was draining his energy, leaving him feeling empty and confused. That night, he had another dream about Lisa. This one was even more intense than the first, filled with passionate encounters that felt completely real. When he woke up, Jake was disturbed to find evidence that Lisa had actually been in his quarters. There was a coffee cup on his desk that hadn't been there before, and his pillow smelled like her shampoo. Jake got dressed and went to find Lisa, but when he located her in the science lab, she acted like nothing had happened. She was focused on her work and seemed completely unaware of anything unusual. As Jake watched her work, he began to suspect that something was very wrong on their ship. The crew was changing, becoming more impulsive and emotional. And Lisa, the woman he cared about, was at the center of it all. Jake decided to investigate what was happening on the ship. He started by reviewing the security cameras in the hallways, looking for any evidence of unusual activity during the night hours. What he found made his blood run cold. The recordings showed Lisa walking through the ship's corridors at 3 a.m, moving with that same strange grace he had noticed at breakfast. She went to different crew quarters, spending time with various people while they slept. The camera showed her entering Jake's room and staying for over an hour, but when Jake checked his own memory, he had no recollection of Lisa actually being there. He only remembered the vivid dream. Either the cameras were lying or something was happening that he couldn't understand. Jake pulled up more recordings from the past few days and discovered a pattern. Every night since their first contact with Eco, Lisa had been visiting different crew members while they slept. She would enter their rooms, spend time there, and then leave before morning. And every day, those same crew members showed signs of emotional disturbance and strange behavior. The next day, Jake confronted Dr. Cooper about what he had found. She was one of the few people on the ship who still seemed normal, and he hoped she could help him figure out what was going on. "Helen, I need to show you something," Jake said, pulling her into a private meeting room. He played the security recordings on his tablet, showing Lisa's nighttime wanderings. Dr. Cooper watched with growing concern. "This is impossible," she said. Lisa was in her quarters all night. I checked on her myself before I went to bed. Jake showed her more recordings, including footage of Lisa in his own room. Look at the timestamp, he said. This was happening while I was asleep, but I have no memory of her being there. Only dreams. Dr. Cooper ran her hands through her hair, looking worried. Jake, what if the dreams are real somehow? What if that creature is doing something to our minds? They decided to set up a hidden camera in Jake's quarters to see what would happen that night. If Lisa really was visiting him, they would have proof. If not, then they would know something else was causing the strange recordings. Meanwhile, the situation on the ship was getting worse. 2 crew members had gotten into a fistfight over a card game. Engineer Murphy had been found crying in the engine room for no reason she could explain. Lieutenant Bradley had tried to seduce Dr. Cooper in the middle of a duty shift, something he would never normally do. Captain Ryan called a meeting to address the crew's declining discipline, but even he seemed affected by whatever was happening. He was more aggressive than usual, snapping at people for minor mistakes and making decisions that didn't make strategic sense. That afternoon, Jake accompanied Lisa on another expedition to the crystal structure. He watched carefully as she communicated with Echo, trying to understand what was really happening between them. The creature seemed to respond to Lisa's presence with increasing enthusiasm, its form shifting more rapidly and the humming sound growing louder. What exactly is it telling you? Jake asked Lisa as they stood in the crystal chamber. Lisa turned to him with that strange, distant smile. Echo is teaching me about consciousness, Jake, about the difference between what we think we want and what we really desire deep down inside. The crystal being made its musical sound, and Jake felt that familiar pressure in his head. But this time, instead of just feeling like something was looking at his thoughts, he had the distinct impression that something was taking his thoughts, copying them and storing them somewhere else. Lisa, I think we should leave, Jake said. Something about this place is affecting the crew. People are acting strangely, and I think it's connected to that thing. But Lisa shook her head. You don't understand, Jake. Echo isn't hurting anyone. It's helping us. It's showing us who we really are underneath all our social rules and pretenses. That night, Jake waited in his quarters with the hidden camera running. He lay in bed pretending to sleep, but kept his mind alert and ready. If Lisa really did come to visit him, he wanted to be conscious enough to remember it, around 2 in the morning. Jake heard his door open quietly. He kept his eyes closed and his breathing steady, but he was fully awake as footsteps approached his bed. He felt the mattress shift as someone sat down next to him. Jake, Lisa's voice whispered in his ear, I know you're awake. Jake opened his eyes and found Lisa sitting on his bed, wearing the same thin nightgown from his dreams. Her eyes had a strange, glassy look that reminded him of Eco's crystalline form. Lisa, what are you doing here? Jake asked, sitting up. In bed, she reached out and touched his face with fingers that felt surprisingly cold. I'm doing what you want me to do, Jake. I can hear your thoughts when you sleep. I know what you dream about. Jake pulled away from her touch. This isn't you, Lisa. Something is controlling you. Lisa laughed, but it didn't sound like her normal laugh. Nothing is controlling me, Jake. I'm finally free to act on the desires I've been hiding. Don't you want that too? Jake got out of bed and backed away from her. You need to leave. Whatever that creature is doing to you, you need to fight it. But Lisa just smiled and stood up, moving toward him with that predatory grace. Echo showed me how to see into your mind, Jake. I know you've wanted me for months. I know exactly what you want me to do. Jake realized that the Lisa he was talking to wasn't really Lisa at all. Something else was using her body, acting out the desires it had stolen from his sleeping mind. The real Lisa was trapped somewhere inside, while this thing wore her like a costume. Get away from me, Jake said, reaching for his weapon. But before he could draw it, Lisa was gone. She had simply vanished, leaving no trace that she had ever been there. Jake checked the hidden camera the next morning and found that it had recorded nothing. The memory card was completely blank, as if something had erased it during the night. Jake knew he had to act fast before the situation got completely out of control. He went to find Dr. Cooper, who was still one of the few crew members acting normally. He found her in the medical bay, running tests on blood samples from the affected crew members. "Helen, I need to tell you what happened last night," Jake said, closing the door behind him. "Lisa came to my quarters, but it wasn't really her. Something else was using her body." Dr. Cooper looked up from her microscope. "Jake, I've been analyzing blood samples from the crew, and I found something disturbing. There are unknown particles in everyone's bloodstream, except for yours and mine." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of particles?" "I don't know exactly, but they seem to be some kind of crystalline structure. Very small, almost like microscopic versions of that creature we found." Dr. Cooper showed him the test results on her computer screen. Jake studied the data, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "So that thing is somehow getting inside people's bodies, but why aren't we affected?" Dr. Cooper thought for a moment. "Maybe it has something to do with our roles on the ship. Your security, trained to be suspicious and alert. I'm medical, trained to analyze and question everything. Maybe our natural skepticism is protecting us somehow." Jake realized that Dr. Cooper might be right. The people who were most affected seemed to be the ones who were most open to new experiences and most willing to trust. Lisa's scientific curiosity had made her an easy target for the creature's influence. "We need to find out what that thing really wants," Jake said. "And we need to figure out how to stop it before it takes over the entire crew." Dr. Cooper agreed, and they began working together to understand the threat they were facing. She continued, analyzing blood samples while Jake reviewed security footage and personnel files, looking for patterns in who was being affected and how. What they discovered was terrifying. The creature wasn't just reading people's minds during sleep. It was actually copying their thoughts and desires, storing them like files in a computer. Then it was using other crew members to act out those stolen desires in the real world. Jake found records showing that the crew's behavior problems weren't random. People were acting out the specific fantasies and suppressed desires of other crew members. The fights, the inappropriate behavior, the emotional outbursts, they were all connected to someone else's hidden thoughts. "It's like a psychological virus," Dr. Cooper said when Jake explained what he had found. "The creature is spreading people's private thoughts and desires throughout the crew, breaking down the social barriers that keep us civilized." Jake nodded grimly, "And Lisa is at the center of it all. The creature is using her as some kind of transmitter, sending her to different people's rooms to act out their fantasies." They decided to confront Captain Ryan with their findings, but when they reached the bridge, they found the captain in an argument with Lieutenant Bradley. The two men were shouting at each other over a minor navigation issue, and both of them had the same glassy look in their eyes that Jake had seen in Lisa. "Captain," Jake said, trying to get his attention, "we need to talk to you privately about the alien creature." Captain Ryan turned to look at Jake, and for a moment his expression cleared. "Morrison, what's your assessment of the situation?" Jake quickly explained what he and Dr. Cooper had discovered about the creature's influence on the crew. He showed the captain the blood test results and the security footage that proved people were being controlled during their sleep. The captain listened carefully, and Jake could see him struggling to think clearly through whatever influence was affecting his mind. "If what you're saying is true, then we need to leave this planet immediately," Captain Ryan said. "But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing out on something important if we go." That was exactly the kind of thinking that Jake knew the creature was promoting. It made people feel like they needed to stay, like leaving would be a terrible mistake. The creature was designed to make its victims want to remain under its influence. "Sir, with respect, that feeling you're having is exactly what the creature wants you to think," Jake said. "It's manipulating your judgment to keep us here." Dr. Cooper stepped forward. "Captain, I recommend we put the ship under quarantine protocols and prepare for immediate departure. The longer we stay, the stronger its influence becomes." Captain Ryan struggled visibly with the decision, his face showing the internal battle between his training as a starship captain and the alien influence trying to cloud his judgment. Finally, his military discipline won out. "You're right," he Side, sound general quarters, all hands to stations. We're leaving orbit in 1 hour. But as the crew prepared for departure, Jake discovered that the creature had anticipated their move. Lisa was in the communications room, working frantically at the main transmitter array. When Jake burst in to stop her, she turned to face him, with eyes that glowed with the same blue light as the crystal being. "You can't leave, Jake," Lisa said, but her voice sounded different. It was layered somehow, as if multiple people were speaking at the same time. "We have so much more to show you. So many desires to explore." Jake realized that the creature was no longer just influencing Lisa, it was directly controlling her, using her body as its own. The real Lisa was still in there somewhere, but the alien consciousness was in charge. "Lisa, I know you can hear me," Jake said, keeping his distance but trying to reach the woman he cared about. "You have to fight this thing. Remember who you are?" For just a moment, Lisa's eyes cleared and her own voice came through. "Jake, it's not just one creature. There are more of them coming. I can see them in my mind. Hundreds of ships, all heading toward human space." Then the alien consciousness took control again, and Lisa's hands moved across the communications console with inhuman speed. Jake realized she was sending a signal into space, calling to others of the creature's kind, and giving them the location of Earth, and all the human colonies. Jake had to make a choice. He could try to stop Lisa by force, which might hurt the woman he loved, or he could find another way to break the creature's control and save both Lisa and humanity. Time was running out, and the fate of his entire species hung in the balance. Jake made his decision in a split second. Instead of trying to stop Lisa by force, he did something that the creature would never expect. He sat down on the floor of the communications room and closed his eyes, forcing himself to think about the most boring and uninteresting things he could imagine. He thought about military regulations, equipment maintenance schedules, and supply inventory reports. He filled his mind with dry technical manuals and mathematical equations. Most importantly, he thought about duty, responsibility, and the oath he had taken to protect innocent people. The creature controlling Lisa paused in its work at the communications console. Jake could feel it trying to read his thoughts, searching for the desires and emotions it could use to manipulate him. But all it found was discipline, duty, and a complete rejection of selfish desires. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked, her voice confused as the alien consciousness struggled to understand Jake's mental state. Jake opened his eyes and looked directly at her. "I'm showing you what makes humans different from your kind," he said calmly. "We don't have to act on every desire or emotion we feel. We can choose to put others before ourselves." The blue glow in Lisa's eyes flickered as the creature encountered something it had never experienced before. Jake could see the real Lisa fighting to regain control, using his example to remember who she really was. "Lisa, remember your training as a scientist," Jake said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "Remember that you chose to dedicate your life to learning and helping others, not satisfying your own desires." Dr. Cooper's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Jake, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the crystal structure on the planet. Something big is happening down there." Jake realized that his mental resistance was having an effect on the creature's network. By refusing to be influenced by his desires, he was creating a kind of psychological feedback that the alien consciousness couldn't process. Lisa stumbled backward from the communications console, her hands shaking as she fought for control of her own body. "Jake, I can see what it really is," she said in her own voice. "It's not just one creature. It's part of a collective mind that feeds on emotional energy. They've destroyed dozens of civilizations by turning people against each other." The ship shook as energy waves from the planet's surface hit their hull. Through the view screen, Jake could see the crystal structure beginning to crack and collapse as the creature's network destabilized. But there's something they didn't count on. Lisa continued, her eyes now clear and focused. "Humans have the ability to choose logic over emotion, duty over desire. That's something their collective mind can't understand or control." Jake helped Lisa to her feet, and together they worked to shut down the communication signal she had been sending. The transmission was cut off just as it was reaching the edge of the solar system. Preventing the creature's allies from learning Earth's location, Captain Ryan's voice came over the intercom. All hands, prepare for immediate departure. The alien structure is collapsing, and we're detecting dangerous energy levels from the planet's surface. As their ship pulled away from the planet, Jake and Lisa watched the crystal structure tear itself apart. The creature's collective consciousness was destroying itself, unable to process the contradiction of beings who could resist their own desires. Dr. Cooper met them on the bridge with her final analysis of the situation. The crystalline particles are breaking down in everyone's bloodstream, she reported. Whatever you two did in that communications room, it created a chain reaction that's freeing the crew from the creature's influence. Jake looked out at the collapsing alien structure and realized what had really happened. The creature's entire existence was based on the idea that all intelligent beings were slaves to their desires. When it encountered humans who could choose duty over desire, love over lust, and sacrifice over selfishness, its basic understanding of reality broke down. Lisa took Jake's hand, and for the first time since their encounter with the creature, her touch felt warm and human again. I remember everything that happened while I was under its control, she said quietly. I'm sorry for what I did to you and the others. Jake squeezed her hand gently. That wasn't you, Lisa. That was the creature, using your body to act out thoughts and desires it stole from people's minds. Captain Ryan joined them at the view screen as the last of the crystal structure crumbled into dust. Morrison, Dr. Carter, your actions saved not just this ship, but potentially our entire species. How did you know that resistance would work? Lisa answered before Jake could speak. Humans are more complex than the creature understood. We don't just have desires and emotions. We have the ability to examine those feelings and choose whether or not to act on them.